Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com, and this is a preview of the Sony a7R Mark IV. Now we're up in New York City. Currently, we are in a hotel room because we just got back from the press briefing, and that's why we're doing the preview right now, where we will run through the specs. I will give you some of my thoughts, and then later we get to pick up the camera and go out and shoot it. Now, before getting into the specs, I do want to say that this was highly unexpected. We did not come up here thinking we would see a full frame R level camera like the one they announced. We thought it was maybe going to be an entry level full frame camera, but here are the specs. We have a 61 megapixel BSI CMOS sensor. Now this is an all new sensor. Now you can expect to see this sensor in future Nikon bodies, because that's kind of how the flow goes. Sony makes a new sensor, and then roughly a year and a half to 2 years down the line, it starts to filter into the Nikon cameras. But this is an all new sensor with 15 stops of dynamic range. The one thing missing from the entire presentation is they did not talk about ISO. Natively, it goes from 100 up to 32,000, which really makes this camera. This is your portrait camera. This is your studio camera. This is the camera you go out and shoot landscapes with because you're getting those 15 stops of dynamic range. Now that doesn't mean that you can't shoot anything, because of course you can shoot anything with any camera if you know what you're doing. But with the 15 stops of dynamic range, this is more your studio, portrait, and landscape style camera. But with that being said, you can shoot up to 10 frames a second for 7 seconds in a row because the buffer is much deeper. Think about that. That's 61 megapixels being moved through at 10 frames a second. Now, I think if you're gonna be shooting at 14-bit uncompressed RAW, at least in the past, we've seen that you do not get to 10 frames a second. And in the little pamphlet that we read, it said that depending on your settings, you will get 10 frames a second. So I think it will dumb it down just a little bit. But in my opinion, you're buying this camera for 61 megapixels, you probably should be shooting in 14-bit as much as possible. Now, I did get to take a couple of sample images with this camera, but it was tethered to the table, so I couldn't really go very far. But we had the model who had a parrot, and I shot off 10 frames a second just to get the feel for the camera, and it felt really nice shooting. It felt better in the hands. And why does it feel better in the hands? Because they redesigned the body. The grip is much deeper, which means it feels better in your hands. It's more reminiscent of a Nikon Z6 or Z7 design. They redid some of the button layouts, and the buttons do not feel as plasticky as they felt before. They have a nice bounce back when you press them, nice tactile feel. And they also have a newer, much larger looking joystick that had some nice knipples on them that moved very well. Now let's talk about autofocus. We have 567 phase detect autofocusing points that cover 74% of the frame. There's also 425 contrast detect autofocus points as well. Now, if you do shoot down in APS-C mode for stills, which they call crop mode, you are getting 26.2 megapixels, which is pretty good for that. I suggest not buying this camera if you're gonna crop it down to dumb it down to 26.2, but some people may wanna do that for extra reach. The one point that they made is the fact that the autofocusing points in the crop mode cover the entire frame when you're shooting. Another thing you'll find in this camera is real-time IAF and focus tracking. We've only seen that in the A9 and I believe the latest A6000 model camera, but that is starting to filter up into all of the future releases. Now, I said that for stills, but you will have continuous IAF for video as well. That is the first time we're seeing that in one of these Sony cameras. Let me jump in here real quick and say I cannot wait to use some of these RAW files with FroPack 1, which are 14 custom Lightroom presets that we created. You can play with them over at FroKnowsPhoto.com/presets, where they are on sale for 40% off. And actually, this image right here was taken with the Sony a7R III and edited with FroPack 1. Now let's get back to the video. Now let's talk about the EVF. There's a 5.76 million dot EVF, which is probably the same one that we saw in the Panasonic S1. It is a vibrant, clear, sharp OLED display, and it is absolutely beautiful. Now, what is not super beautiful is the 3-inch 1.4 million dot, hold on, touchscreen on the back of the camera. Sony seems to do a terrible job with putting in nicer screens on the back of their cameras. One of the things I noticed, again, is that when I went into the menu system and started to try to touch the screen to operate the menu, is it didn't do it. So unless I'm missing something, which I don't think we are, because we went into the menu, we looked for touch capabilities, we have it on, you still can't touch the screen, which makes no sense when you're trying to operate the menu. And another thing is when you're shooting at 10 frames a second and you're letting the buffer filter out to the cards, you go to try to do preview or to hit the menu, it tells you you have to wait until it's done writing. Now, what is it writing to? Two UHS 2 SD cards. I would have preferred that they change the slots to XQD so it's prepared for the future for CF Express, but they did not do that. What they did do is make the top slot number 1 and the bottom slot number 2. Now, anybody shooting with a Sony camera always knows that it makes no sense that 1 is on the bottom and 2 is on the top. They reversed that, but you still have to put the card in backwards when you pop it in. Also, part of the new design of the camera is a new way to open the door. You press, you pull it this way, and the door flops open. In terms of wireless capability, they've updated the wireless capability of this camera. You can now do wireless tethering. Now, I hope that you can shoot to the card and tether wirelessly at the same time, just in case, somebody stands in the way and blocks some of those 1s and 0s, or there's an error. You don't want to take a picture that's cool and then have it transferring and then you miss it. That's more of something that we will test out in the real world. Again, this is just a preview video. Now, in terms of video, they didn't spend a lot of time talking about the video other than saying it's full frame 4K that is downsampled from 6K. However, if you want to get a full pixel 1:1 readout, you're going to have to go down into the Super 35 crop mode. So the features that we're seeing for video here are very similar to what you would have seen in the R3. Now, something that I need to say in passing is they did update the hot shoe. They have a new microphone that allows you to record digitally from the mic right into the camera. So that's something that maybe we'll test out if we get one of those mics to play with. So it's pretty cool to see what Sony is doing because they have a lot of audio technology, and starting to incorporate that digitally into this camera will be good. And I think we'll see that in other future cameras that are meant more for video. This, like I said, is more for the stills. If you're somebody looking to get more megapixels than 61 megapixels, you do have pixel shift technology in this camera that will give you up to 240 megapixels in one image. The way that it does that is it takes a bunch of images, moves the sensor, just shifts it, that's why it's called pixel shift, moves the sensor, captures an image, and then you can put it together in their Imaging Edge software to get a 240 megapixel image. That's going to be interesting for landscapes as long as the background isn't really moving from picture to picture, or if you're shooting any type of architecture and you need more megapixels. Now let's talk about pricing. $3,500 US, and in Canada, you're at $4,500, and the cameras will be available sometime in September. $3,500 is a fantastic price. It's in line with what we saw with the Z7, very close to it, and the D850. $3,500 for a 61 megapixel camera like this that they're saying gives you medium format quality is reasonable in my mind. Now, they did give us pricing for the grip. You're looking at roughly $400 in US and $530 if you're Canadian, which means I would probably drive across the border to come to the US to then go buy the grip so you can save some dollars because, well, or maybe it's just exactly the same with the currency change. At the end of the day, we thought one of the things we would see being announced would be an A7S III because that's super long in the tooth for the old one, but that wasn't the case. We were surprised to see this camera. What do you guys think about an A7R Mark IV? I bet you some of the comments are gonna be like, awesome! A7R IIIs are going to get much less expensive to buy used. That's still a fantastic camera. This is a very nice option for portraits, for landscapes, 61 megapixels. We're going to get our hands on it, do more of a preview or a hands-on review, and then bring that to you as soon as possible. So thank you very much for watching. Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com. See ya.